Welcome to the Embodiment podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with embodiment specialists from around the world. I'm your host, Mark Walsh. So on the show today, we have Ryan Spielman. So Ryan is an Ashtanga yoga teacher. He also he does some comedy, some music, groups of conscious discussion, mostly known for his yoga, though. He teaches at Tri Yoga in London for the Ashtanga approach, particularly. I've done some classes with him there, which I enjoyed. And Ryan, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me.
I'll start with the same question as I ask everyone, which is, how did you get into working with the body?
Working with the body. I took a Hatha yoga class many years ago, and from the first class, I was hooked. I felt like that this is my calling, and I knew after that class that I wanted to be a yoga teacher. I wasn't into sports or athletics very much before then, and I seemed to have an affinity for yoga. And once I started that, then as far as the body goes, I was very interested in health and maintaining my physical well-being. So I went down the rabbit hole there.
And you've really got into the area of Ashtanga yoga particularly, right? So for those who are new to Ashtanga, don't particularly know what yoga is, could you explain what that is?
Sure. Well, there are lots of different styles of yoga. Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga originated in Mysore, India with, there's a lineage of people, but the person who's mainly attributed to the coming up with the sequence, his name is Pattabhi Jois, and it's a series of postures. It's very popular and it's quite challenging, physically challenging. It's very dynamic. And it was a major innovation in the Hatha yoga world, insofar as it added a new idea, which is combining postures together, linked together in a sequence, which up until then really wasn't done. There were, postures were practiced kind of separately, and so Pattabhi Jois's guru Krishnamacharya and Pattabhi Jois, they started linking them together, and then it became this moving meditation. So it was not only physically challenging, but because of the movement and the breath linked together, it became there was a meditative aspect to it, and it feels good.
So there's a few things I want to kind of point out there. So first of all, there was the yoga my mother did kind of in the 60s was more like one posture and then another posture, kind of separate. And most of the yoga that's done today in the kind of big cities of the West is coming from this, right? So the Ashtanga kind of came along and said, actually, you can have this fairly rigorous physical kind of flow. For some people becomes a workout. And then the Vinyasa kind of yoga coming off from Ashtanga as a kind of offshoot of that. And this is really accounting for a lot of the yoga that's practiced in the West today.
Yeah, absolutely. It really had one of the most it had the biggest impact, I would say, on Western yoga. You could also mention Iyengar yoga, but Iyengar also came from the Krishnamacharya lineage. So Krishnamacharya had a lot to do with the world of yoga that we know today.
And this particular style really caught you by the sounds of things personally. I know we've talked about this before. It really hooked you and you went very deeply into it.
Yeah, I did. I loved it. I was extremely passionate about it. And one of the things I liked about it is that it is sequential and it's progressive. So there are 6 series in total, and they get progressively harder. So once you master the first series, you move on to the second series and so on. And I really liked that. I wanted to challenge myself. I was young and enthusiastic, and I wanted to see how far I could get. And I also thought, well, if you get to the end of the series, then you get enlightened. And I wanted to get to the end and get enlightened.
And you actually, I mean, very, very few people get past the sort of second or third series, right? There's the primary series, which is what I would do if I came to your class in London, and most Ashtanga yoga classes are. And then, it gets really quite difficult and athletic, but by even a couple of series in, right?
Yeah. Then it starts to get kind of circusy. And I don't know anyone who practices the fifth or sixth series. I know a few of the postures. So the now lineage holder Sharat Rangaswamy, who's the grandson of Patabi Joyce, he supposedly practices all six series. Now, I'm not that interested in it, in advancing, but I did manage to complete the fourth series,
which is rare.
Yeah. You got to have a certain level of flexibility and a certain amount of time to dedicate to it.
And it always sounds kind of competitive for kind of people like myself, maybe you too, who are fairly kind of driven people who want to get to that next step. I imagine there's a certain seduction in that.
I think so. I don't see that as a bad thing necessarily. It definitely has a downside, but it does actually cause some problems with people confusing the real point of the practice. So a lot of people get lost in wanting to get the next posture, or getting to the next series, and partly that has to do with the way that it's taught, because the senior teachers in the tradition hold postures back from people. So they hold it back, and then it makes people want it more.
Good marketing, good marketing strategy.
So I've always been more liberal about teaching the series, and for the most part, if people want to do more, then I encourage them to, as long as they're being safe and paying attention, because I think it's fun, and at a certain point, you can only go so far. I mean, if you can't put your leg behind your head, then you can't put your leg behind your head and do the twisting pose.
There are physical limitations, right? There are people who, no matter how much they practice, are just simply not going to be able to do certain physical things.
Yeah, and I think people can actually do more than the Ashtanga tradition traditionally lets them do. So, with a few modifications and some assistance, I think people can actually get the benefits of some of the more advanced postures that you wouldn't normally get to do if you were just following the tradition as it's taught in Mysore.
And as I understand, this kind of Mysore style practice is normally a couple of things that are a bit different about it. That often it's early in the morning. I remember your classes, at Tri Yoga are pretty early. And the other thing is that you usually do it every single day, and the same sequence every single day. And usually kind of on your own, right? You might have some supervision, but it's not like a class as such. So it's a little bit of a different way of practicing yoga than some people might think.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the great things that the Ashtanga Vinyasa tradition has to offer. The idea of self-practice, and because it's a set sequence, once you learn the sequence, then you can practice on your own at your own pace, and that's when you can go inwards, and you're not always listening to a teacher tell you what to do, and you're not stuck on the whatever personality, whatever information that the teacher is conveying to you. You get to figure it out for yourself. So it's very beautiful in that way. So I think an average person should get to move on from the first series, and thereby not just doing the same sequence every single day. You get a more varied practice, a more comprehensive practice. So once you learn the basics, then you add on more and more. So you should be able to create a comprehensive physical practice for each person. And I would also say one of the benefits of self-practice is that if it's used correctly, it can suit it can suit people at whatever level you're at and for whatever need you might want. So for me at 19 years old, who just wants to, do all the crazy stuff, it was great for me. But people who come to my classes and they're 55 and they just want to do a little stretch, a little bit of a workout, and just spend some time moving and breathing, they can do just a very simple beginning sequence in the Ashtanga sequence. And so it can meet their needs as well.
Yeah. And the fact that it's, repetitive in some ways is, that might not, in some ways it's quite countercultural, right? We live in the culture of give me something new, give me something different, give me something more. And to be doing something repeatedly, which is very much like how traditional martial arts is as well in my own practice. I've been doing some techniques for 20 years. And there's something in that which means that when I'm doing those techniques, I can just focus on the more interesting aspects. I'm not going, okay, well, what's being taught? And, I can actually focus on some of the more subtleties that are there.
Yes, absolutely. And, this is true with everything. You do the same thing every day. Especially if you're interested in it, levels will unfold. It will become a new practice, a new posture every time you do it, or, over time you might discover new things about it. So that's a real benefit of doing repetitive practice, or the same sequence over and over.
You get to kind of go deeply into one thing rather than jumping around and trying to dig a dozen different wells.
Exactly.
And what are the benefits of it then? So there's sort of, someone says, okay, I went into the class, it looked like everyone was doing this kind of sweaty early morning workout, jumping around, downwards dog, chaturanga. Like what are the benefits beyond the sort of obvious kind of health and fitness ones?
Well, for me, it's time for myself. It's meditative time. It's quiet. I'm simply moving and breathing because it's a set sequence. I don't have to think about what's coming next. My body just knows what to do, and I can shut my mind off and just be in the flow of moving and breathing, which is a delight. It's a real blessing, to have that. And there are other things as well that feed into other aspects of life. Daily discipline, I think, is really important. Just to get up and do it, whether you want to or not.
Yeah, I mean, just developing this. I just wrote this in a bit of a book I was writing. Just to do anything in the morning, right? Let's say you woke up and you laid brick and you did 10 bricks every day. Just that discipline in itself, forget about the bricklaying or the yoga, is itself really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to have a discipline in your life, it isn't just a solitary practice because, well, it can be. Lots of people practice on their own at home and never see anyone else. But usually, you're involved in some kind of community, and I think that is beneficial as well, to be in a room with other people who have the same desire, the same focus, and to learn and grow with a group of people. And you have your own individual subjective experience, and then you can share it with other people as well.
Yeah, I want to come back to the community one a little bit when we talked about yoga a little bit more, because that's definitely, I know, something else you've been exploring for sort of conscious communication. Why don't we just go there now then, actually, as it's come up. So there's the body practice, the physical practice. You've done yoga a long time, but then as I understand it, you've also been leading these groups where people are sharing, kind of authentic communication groups. Is that how you describe them?
Sure, that's a good way to describe them. Yeah. So for me, I was, from a very young age, I was interested in, like I said, enlightenment. And I use that is a controversial word. I like to use it just as a shorthand for something like growing, expanding, deepening myself and the world in some way. I don't know if there's an it out there. I don't think there is, but a final destination, but the idea of furthering my own potential, my own growth, realizing my own potential, that has always been a big part of, or it has been the driving force of my life. So Hatha Yoga was a part of that, was embraced by that, and I soon began to realize that just a physical practice and just a solitary meditative practice is not a full enlightenment,
because it's not relational.
It doesn't get to everything. There are lots of other dimensions of human being, and so one of the other things that I encountered, and I think there are lots of them, but this is one practice that really connected with me, was you called it authentic communication. We've never really found a great word, a great term to describe what we do, but it's a support group. It's about authentically relating to each other. We call it yoga of relating, or sometimes we call it a sharing group, and it's not that different from a group therapy or a support group, but the underlying philosophy is to be here now in the present, to be real, and to be unconditional about being here in this moment, and being truthful and open and honest. So with that as the as the vehicle, then anything else that happens is it just changes group by group, day by day, and now it's just such a part of my life. I don't really distinguish between the group atmosphere and this conversation that we're having now.
I think we have a mutual student who goes to it, or at least has been to it. I haven't been to it, so I don't quite know what you do, but I heard good things.
Okay, cool.
And I know we have this circling, this nonviolent communication. There's a few of these kind of things cropping up now, and I wonder, it's becoming a bigger thing. And it's still kind of, I've noticed, fairly hard to get people to such groups. I kind of started an early morning one, and the nearest I see that's big is something like 12-step, but then there's this very addiction recovery is this big motivation for a lot of people to get to talk. Yeah. But outside of that, I see it's still fairly minority, but it seems like it's on people's radar increasingly that just doing it on your own, your meditation or your yoga or whatever it is, we actually, even if it's even a social practice like Aikido or jiu-jitsu, we need to move it into the verbal domain.
Mm-hmm. You just cut the sound just cut off there. I didn't catch the last word.
I'm saying that there's this idea that I see, while still minority, that is growing though now, is that we need to move practice into the verbal domain, i.e. that we're creatures who chat, that we talk to each other. That's a big part of life. And if all our practices are sort of silent movement-based practices or silent sitting practices, then maybe something is missed.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the reason why it's not that common for people to attend these types of groups is because it's scary. It's fucking scary. I was petrified the first few years. It really took a long time for me to be comfortable. But the thing that attracted me was that I was afraid, and I wanted to not be afraid. I wanted to figure out how I could be comfortable with a bunch of people, staring at me, or being seen by a bunch of people, being seen in my nervousness and anxiousness and stumbling over words, things like that me in particular was one of my big facades. Was I came across as super peaceful, and I wanted to convey to everyone that I had my shit together, and so when someone just smashed through that by seeing me, it was it scared me, but I liked it.
You said a few things that are interesting to me here. one is this idea that it's scary, isn't it? You know, like I wonder one reason yoga's popular is that you're on your mat, you're in your little space. It's socially quite constrained. Like there's pretty strict rules, and we kind of, unofficial rules about what happens. And, it's kind of sexy and appealing on top of that. You go to an Ashtanga class and it's like, wow, this is cool, sexy, and I'm safe. I'm in my little space and I get a set thing to do. And then when you're in human interaction, my experience is like, fuck, anything could happen here. And how's this going to go down? And what if, social shame is much more scary to me than, I don't know, being hit in a martial arts class or overstretching or something. That's a consequence that's pretty hardcore for social animals. I think I'm not alone in this. But as you say, like for people, and I think maybe we share this, like when there's a fear there, it's like, oh, I want to do it. Yeah. It was like, I want to learn to do that. As a teenager, when I realized like, oh God, I can't go and tell that girl I like her. Then the part of me that wants to grow, that doesn't like being afraid of things goes, right, I need to learn how to go talk to that pretty girl, Yeah. Like, and these kind of social, but then it's just not something most people are training as a conscious practice, kind of social interaction. We get kind of good enough at it and we get through those clunky teenage years. And then it's like, yeah, I can talk to Ryan. Yeah, I can go buy some, stuff from the shop later. And we're not taking it to the next level of actually really deeply being authentic or listening.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've noticed is that you either come to it, like you said, from suffering or from pain. It's too painful. You have to figure out a way out of it. And the other way, and this is the way I think most people who come to groups like the one that I attend, they come to it because they're pretty satisfied with life. They're fairly content, and they recognize that there's more to go. There's a lot more to develop, and it feels good to continue to grow.
Yeah.
So then you start, when you're at that stage of your journey, your growth, whatever, then you start to look around you look inside and you say, where am I kind of deficient? What's scary for me? What can I develop? And then, it's almost fun to get into that scary place.
Yeah, I'm thinking of me and my wife and going, okay, we have a good relationship, communication's good, physical's good, spiritual connection. And then it's like, okay, well, that creates this nice basis, this nice foundation for going, okay, what would be edgy? What would be a growth for us,
Mm-hmm.
From that sort of safe, happy place. We've had a lot of people that have come on the show talking about stories of disembodiment and pain and injury and how that led to embodiment. So it's nice to hear the other side too.
Yeah. Well, that has been my the way it's been for me in my life, because I haven't had a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
And I've created some in later life. I've had my share of issues, but I didn't have early childhood trauma. I always have been content with life for the most part, and so everything that I've been interested in has come from this fullness.
It's nice to hear that. As I said, usually the stories I hear are more like disembodiment stories and coming from pain. And most yoga teachers' bios are, I hurt my back and I'd been working in the office and then I discovered yoga. And it feels different, because sometimes when someone's got to something through necessity and pain, there's a way in which they're quite attached to it. Does that make sense? Like, this healed me.
Yeah.
I need it.
Yeah.
Different energy that can come with it if it comes from that sort of story.
Yeah, totally. But I would say one of the things that I had to learn was how it feels for other people, because it took me a long time to understand that a lot of people, or what effect early trauma or life trauma does to someone, especially at an early age, and how difficult it is to overcome that or move through it. And I just couldn't empathize with that for a long time.
Yeah.
So I think I was judgmental for many years, and just like, come on, get over it, drop it,
It's
let
easy,
it go.
it's easy not to see our own blessings, isn't it? Like I don't get embarrassed easily, and there's, various reasons for that, my childhood, blah, blah, blah. But I find it hard when students are like, look, I'm embarrassed to do this. I'm like, well, just go do it, just shout in the street, or, whatever it is that I'm asking them to do as a practice that's a bit weird. And it's hard for me to empathize and relate to that. And I think that's part of the journey as being a teacher, isn't it? Is you, as a teacher, your own strengths are also weaknesses in your teaching, because you don't get why they're not strengths for other people.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to pick up on something you said, which I find interesting. You talked about kind of like a persona of, having it together or being peaceful or calm. And it seems to me like this is a risk in meditation, yoga, martial arts, slightly different flavors of it in different arts. But as soon as we set ourselves up as teachers, which we both are, we're both professionals, and many of the people listening to the show I know are, and we say, look, my job is to help people get it together. My job is to help people be calm. I'm a stress management consultant. And that creates potentially a target on our backs. Like I had a group in Manchester trying to wind me up when I was teaching a stress management training, and they were like, oh, the stress management trainer's getting upset, And it can also create a kind of false self where I'm going, okay, I don't want to, I'm upset, but I don't want to show it because I'm the stress management trainer, or I'm the calm, the yoga teacher that's always very calm and has the calm voice, or the martial arts teacher who's always tough and is never afraid of everything. There's different flavors of it, but the danger of creating a kind of false self, or believing our own advertising, and that being quite limiting.
Yes, it's insidious, that one. Gotta be vigilant and always look out for it. In my experience. And luckily, I think the group that we were talking about has had a big impact on my life in that way, because there's always been people to say, excuse me, you're full of shit right now. And then, I know I can't fool everybody. And it's also been important for me to actually be authentic, not just to pretend to be authentic or to appear authentic. So, a good partner, a good relationship is helpful for keeping you honest, and a good group of people that can call you on your stuff is good for that as well. And so that's one thing I think is important for any discipline.
And we all do. And this is where I find it can become like, on the one hand, I want to have basic integrity in what I'm doing. And on the other hand, I also want to be able to be a human being, And
absolutely,
the target that gets painted on our back as soon as we, particularly in British culture, maybe it's easier in the States, I don't know, but around, you think you're better than us, as soon as you're a vegetarian, it happens. As soon as you're a Buddhist, it happens. The first time I lost my temper after I said I was a Buddhist, my mum, who I love dearly, was like, oh, Mr. Buddhist, I'm like, Mom, come on, leave it out.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to internalize that. I don't want to internalize that. Oh, I'm never allowed to be not calm, or whatever it is.
Right. Well, I mean, that is the confused stereotype of what an enlightened person is, or peaceful. It's that you're always calm and peaceful, but it's not that. It's that you are yourself. You are unconflicted with your state, and there's no barrier between what's on the inside and what's on the outside. So if you're angry, you're angry.
Yeah. And that also engenders trust. There's something, when I meet people that have done a lot of spiritual bypassing, or that are kind of suppressing anger, or one of the less kind of pretty emotions, you feel it, right? I feel it, and I don't trust them.
Sure.
Like something's incongruent here between what they're saying and something going on inside they're managing, and they might be managing it well, but it always leaks a little bit, like a dog can always smell it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but to me, everyone is so obvious.
We're the last to know normally, right? It's pretty clear.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do think it is important for teachers to have a peer group that holds you accountable. And that's the classic story of gurus who create scandals. And I've known a few of them, and it's always because they don't have a group of people who they trust to call them on their shit.
I really get this right now, particularly. And I think, first of all, if you're in a context of teaching a martial arts class or a yoga class, you can look good for that 2 hours, for that hour or 2 hours. It's such a controlled context that you can never look bad. If you know what you're doing, you set the rules, it's all controlled. But as you say, in a conversational context, it's much messier. In a life context with kids next door, or whatever my wife wants to talk to me tonight about, it's going to be more. And the peer group's so important. Like I was just with one of my there's a few peers on something called the Embodiment Facilitator course that I run, and one of them smokes. And I just took her aside yesterday and said, "Hey, what's going on? Is that cool? Is that a good example? Let's talk about it. I'm not judging you, but let's talk about that." And she was like, "Okay, cool." So we talked about it, And then today I get a text message from two of my other peers saying, "We want to talk to you Monday evening. We're not going to tell you what about, but we need to talk to you." So I'm like, okay, my first reaction is like fear. I'm in trouble. What have I done? They're going to call me on some shit. That they're calling an emergency meeting. This can't be good. And then my next reaction is, wow, how lucky am I that they can do that? How lucky am I that like two of my close friends and colleagues who I trust and love and who are smart people are probably going to, I don't know what it is, but it sounds like they're going to kick my ass on something. And they've talked to each other, they've scheduled a meeting, and they've said, you need to come at this time. And I'm like, I'm scared, like, oh my God, what's going down? I hope this isn't serious. But also I'm like, wow, that's cool that they can do that. It's cool that there's a couple of people in my life who are in my organization who can kick my ass about whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
I'm wondering where we go now. We could go into jiu-jitsu. I know that's been a passion of yours lately. Or maybe
how much time you have?
Are you going to get properly? Are you in the geek stage? So normally when people start getting into something fairly early, they're like, I remember like when I bought all the Aikido books and I bored all my friends talking about it every day. Are you in the geek stage of jiu-jitsu right now?
Oh, totally.
So what made you want to start, like, for those that don't know, like wrestling around and choking people out, what made a fine, upstanding yoga teacher like yourself want to get down and dirty and sweaty with people on the mat?
Yeah. Well, I've never been in a fight in my life, and I've never had any interest in martial arts. I probably had a lot of judgment about fighting, people who want to fight, boxing, MMA, just like the thought of hitting another human being. How would you want to do that to somebody? And
this is where we're going to diverge, I see, but go on.
And then I don't, I'm 43 years old, and I've noticed that I've changed a lot in the last few years. And I think it has something to do with my age. I don't know how, like in what way it's affected, but it has to do with a different life stage and an openness to just other perspectives. So the story is that someone got up in my face and confronted me. It was a next door neighbor, and he was playing his music loud, and he was kind of a rough guy, scary guy. And I asked him to turn the music down. He was playing all day long, every weekend. And I asked him to turn it down, and he got up in my face. He said, it's the weekend. I'll play it if I want to. And he, sort of threatened violence. And I just cowered completely. My whole body shrunk. I got all nervous. I didn't know what to do. And I backed away. And I couldn't stop thinking about that incident for days. And I didn't want to feel like that. I want to be able to stand up.
Yeah.
So I started looking into martial arts, and jiu-jitsu really stood out for me, particularly because you get to fight. You get to really fight, and
you get to spar and go for it and choke someone out.
Yeah. And I wanted to experience that fear. So I was I was hooked before I took the first class because there's some great videos. There's a couple great teachers online, Hannah and Hidon Gracie, who I still consider they're my main teachers, even though I've never met them. Actually, I met Hidon in person once.
Are they the super enthusiastic young guys that are like, yeah, we're going to do this? They're so enthusiastic. I love
They just have so much energy. They explain things really well.
Friend of mine. Yeah, they just, it's just infectious, isn't it? Like how much they love what they do. I love those guys.
Particularly Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a lot to do with me getting hooked. But I took the first class, and the teacher. You shouldn't do this, by the way. If you go to a jiu-jitsu class, you should really consider whether you want to spar on your first day, because the traditional schools, they go, okay, you go with that guy, and they paired me up with this gigantic guy, and I said, I don't know anything. What do I do? And the teacher said, survive.
Old school, because I mean, some more modern schools wouldn't let you spar for a few months, until you learned the basics.
Yes, and I think for most people that's definitely the way to go. But this guy immediately grabbed me and got on top of me, and I tapped out in 2 seconds because I was in panic mode. There was a giant guy on top of me. He didn't even submit me or get me into submission.
But it's fear, isn't it? Like I remember the first time I came to BJJ, having done quite a lot of other martial arts, but that were less practical, and fear when someone's like on your back, and even before they put a lock on or a choke on, it's like you've got some big guy like right on top of you.
Yeah.
And the first thing to control before technique is just a panic, isn't it?
Exactly. Yes. And that's the main thing. I mean, now there's so much more to it. I'm passionate about the technique, and I'm studying technique, but a lot of the growth for me has been just to deal with the panic. And not to, you can't control. I mean, if your body goes into panic, it goes into panic. But now, having had that experience over and over, I realized that, okay, I'm not dying right now in this moment. I can breathe. I've got a little bit of space here. I can breathe right here. So I turn my head and I can breathe, and I just calm down. And the more I can be relaxed, the more things open up in the sparring. So there's always a little escape here or there, or a way to submit or get a dominant position somehow, if you just relax. So it's a great way to learn to control your panic and your body's natural reaction to freak out if someone's grabbing you.
Yeah, I mean, it's what I love about embodied practice is it looks like Ashtanga is about downwards dog, but really it's about, say, discipline. Or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu looks like it's about choking people out, but what it's really about is coping with panic, dealing with fear, being relaxed under pressure. And this is what I love about embodied practice. It's like what's possible in terms of the growth as people from them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think the yoga has helped some with jiu-jitsu. The main thing is breathing. To be able to just maintain steady breathing. I notice that other people who don't have that background get worked up much, much faster.
Yeah, I noticed
breathing heavily through their mouth, and they lose it. They go into panic, or they gas out. So maintaining the breath has been really helpful.
And again, it's competitive as well. Well, I'd done non-competitive Aikido for years, and I did a little bit of jiu-jitsu for a year or so to kind of get a grasp of a more competitive art. And I really liked it. And for years, I demonized competition as like, oh, that's not spiritual. That's kind of beneath me. I'm not one of those guys that needs to prove anything. And I loved it. And, without being abusive to anyone or getting ego inflated by it. But I love the competitive aspect of it.
Some of the things that are going on for me now, and as I'm learning at the stage I'm at in jiu-jitsu, and I've been doing it almost every day for the last 2 years. So I'm totally obsessed. And the stage that I'm at now is, so I think this is just my my personality type, I'm not aggressive. I don't want to go out and dominate and just attack and, make people submissive and try and psych people out. That is not my way. Maybe I'll become that, but it doesn't seem to be happening. When I usually meet people's aggression with more relaxation. And so if someone is in major aggressive attack mode, and a lot of these young guys who are in class, they're like, 20, 21, 22, they got a lot of testosterone. They want to win. They're new to it. They just want to win at whatever cost. I usually just let them do what they want to do to me. And that has been helpful. One is, I don't mind if I get submitted, if I have to tap out, fine. That is a learning experience. And I'm in it for the long haul. So I don't need to win today, right now.
Yeah. What do you get, a medal? Doesn't really help your life.
But also what tends to happen is that the more relaxed I get, the more frustrated they get. Mm-hmm. And it helps, make space for in my head to see what's really going on. I really enjoy that, like, contemplation as it's happening, as we're sparring, as we're fighting.
Mm. Yeah, because people might not realize, but jiu-jitsu is kind of like a game of chess. There's real like skill to it, and the moves and the kind of way you have to think about the next thing that's going to happen. There's a lot there, which is difficult when you're in that fight or flight mode and your breath's gone and you're full of lactic acid. That's difficult to do.
Yeah, it's a lot like wrestling. So it looks a lot like wrestling. The two people rolling around on the floor usually. I mean, there's stand-up techniques, but mainly you go to the ground and then you're wrestling, you're rolling around on the floor.
Mm. So the last thing I wanted to talk to you about was your work in sort of music and comedy, singing songs. I was at a yoga festival where you were doing sort of comedy songs about yoga. The yoga world and the meditation world takes itself fairly seriously. So we've had a couple of comedians actually on the podcast, but none who were also yoga people. Of all the embodiment disciplines I've been around, it seems like yoga is probably the one that takes itself maybe the most seriously. So say something about what got you into kind of writing funny songs.
Well, I think it was, so I've been teaching for almost 25 years. And I think if you do anything for that long time, then you go through phases of loving it and hating it, and loving it again. And I think at a certain point I needed to make fun of this thing that I'm doing, that I'm spending so much time and energy doing. Otherwise I would start to go a little bit crazy. I needed to joke about it. And there weren't a lot of people joking about it. Mm. And I think, life is absurd anyway. It's this life is mysterious and ridiculous. And anyone who thinks that they know what's going on here is lying. So there's I've always had a sense of like this is a cosmic joke. There's something weird going on here. And from that place, I started writing a few songs that kind of poked fun at myself. The one song that kicked it all off was the first song I ever wrote was called "The Lonely Guru," and I have now identified this as like a syndrome of mine, but it might be a few other people might have it as well. It's the lonely guru syndrome, where I feel like the universe should be treating me better than it is. I am extremely enlightened. I've done a lot of work. And what's the problem, universe? You need to be I should have disciples by now. I should have
And a Ferrari.
an ashram by now. I should, there should be more evidence of my prowess. And so I'm a lonely guru in that respect. So it's kind of like defeated, cynical guru. And I recognize that I have, I have that story running sometimes. And I just thought it would be funny to write a song like that. I wanted to, like I do in my groups, I wanted to call it out. I wanted to expose it. I wanted to, make fun of it in a loving way almost. And then once I wrote that song, all of these songs just started pouring out of me. And I was looking for any area that was uncomfortable, either in myself or that I saw in my communities of friends that people weren't talking about. I mean, that's what comedy is.
It's what people aren't talking about, isn't it? It's the thing that needs to be talked about that somehow is too uncomfortable or too taboo.
Yeah.
And comedy is one way of talking about the untalkable.
Yeah. So I started writing songs about all those things, and I recorded a couple albums. You can get them on iTunes and Spotify and things like that if you look up Ryan Spielman. And I haven't written a song for about a year and a half. It dried up. The floodgates closed. The faucet turned off. I don't know. You can only ride the wave when it's there. And
Sure.
So for the moment, the creativity around the music making has dried up. But I still have a lot of love for those songs. I think they're funny, and a couple of them. I don't want to sound too immodest here, but I think a couple of them are really brilliant. I really still look at the lyrics and think, wow, that's quite clever. And I don't feel like it's even from me.
No good art is it?
Yeah.
Where are you going with all this, man? So it's kind of, you're still relatively young in terms of enlightened gurus. And where are you going with all this? It's just in terms of what does the next 10, 20 years look like for you?
That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that. I'm asking myself that at this point in my life. But there's one other thing that we could talk about probably.
We got a bit of time.
I've started training to be a therapist. So now I'm going to school, and I want to start to do counseling, psychotherapy, and I might transition into that. I don't know if I'll stop teaching yoga. We'll see what happens. But that's going to be a big part of my life soon. And I used to, like I said, it wasn't that I wanted to be a guru, but I've always been really passionate about my own growth and to get people together in the name of that somehow, in whatever form, whatever. It doesn't matter what we're doing, but as long as that is the underlying theme, then I was happy with that. So that's been what I've done for the last 20 years. And I noticed that the energy for that is shifting. I don't have a strong motivation to be a teacher anymore. So I don't know where it's going. I really don't know what it's going to look, what I'm going to be doing in the next 5 years or 10 years. I from a young age, I had a purpose. I knew what I wanted to do and what I wanted it to be. So that was very clear. And now I don't have it. And I've always felt sorry for people who don't have a purpose. And I recognize it as a condition. I don't think you can't manufacture a purpose. You can't fabricate it.
Sure.
You either have a purpose or you don't.
I think there's an element of sort of humanistic choice in it, but it's more about finding it than choosing it in some ways.
Yeah.
I've coached quite a lot of people on this, and it's an interesting one. I don't normally ask that question to guests. I just intuitively felt like it might be an interesting one. But okay. Well, thank you, sir. Anything else you want to say before we in fact, is there anything experiential? Sometimes people are listening to this, they like to do something as they're listening to it, as they're walking along the subway or taking a stroll through Hyde Park or wherever they are. Is there anything you want to offer or invite people to who are listening to this?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't have like a practice. I don't have a practice that I think everyone should do. Even like, take a moment and breathe. No, I don't do that. Only if you want to do that. But I don't have a one thing that I subscribe to.
Fair enough. Valid answer. And you're always welcome down in Brighton. We've got some pretty good yoga and jiu-jitsu down here. There's actually very world-class jiu-jitsu down here.
Awesome.
Down, then come and say hello to me and my wife. We're very welcome. And I might, if I'm at Try Yoga, I'll probably see you again at some point if I'm doing a yoga intensive up in London.
Great. I hope so.
Where can people find out more about you? It's trueryan.com, right?
trueryan.com for yoga, ryantrue.com for music. And I'll just make another plug for my other website is wisestudies.com. And that is just another project of mine where we're working with academics, scholars, and making audio courses for academic study of the contemplative traditions of the East and West. So yoga scholars and Buddhist scholars teaching audio courses, kind of university-style lectures.
Interesting. Oh, I'm sad I didn't know about that. I would have asked you about that. That sounds pretty cool. And you also did a podcast where I interviewed a whole bunch of other sort of major yoga teachers, didn't you?
Yeah, the podcast is the Lonely Guru podcast. It's on iTunes, and I've got 30 or so interviews up there with other yoga teachers and people in various traditions. So it's not just yoga.
And what was as someone who's, just purely selfishly here, someone who's podcasting and is earlier in the process than you, what did you get from that, like interviewing all those different teachers?
Oh, for me, it was just fun. It was just, it is still, I only want to talk to people that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And that I want to learn from. So there are a bunch of podcasts out there where you can just interview any and every yoga teacher, let's say, about whatever it is that they do. I'm not into that so much. There had to be something particular about that person that connected with me, or something that I wanted to debate or figure out or something like that. So that's what I use the podcast for.
Okay, cool. Well, for me, it's awesome to have the chance. People like me and you are real busy, but it's like, okay, there's a podcast. We get to speak for an hour. That's nice.
It is. It really is. You don't get to sit down and have an hour-long chat with.
It's rare, isn't it? We did it once, like a year ago or something, in a yoga studio, but it's pretty rare. So for me, if nothing else, I'm getting that from the podcast. I hope it's useful to other people too. So, Ryan, I actually have to go to yoga. It's time. It's time for yoga. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. That was great.
Cheers. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to get more. If you'd like to help us build the Embodied Tribe, leave a review on iTunes or share this on your social media. If you're interested in training globally, sign up to receive the newsletter at embodiedfacilitator.com. Until next time, welcome home to the body.